Welcome to another deep dive. And get ready because this one is, well, it's a doozy.
It really is. And honestly, it's one of those stories that I think a lot of developers out there are they're going to relate to it on a visceral level.
Yeah, visceral is a good word for it. So we're diving into the world of Rust. But before you click that next episode button thinking, oh, another Rust love fest, hold on.
Yeah, this isn't your typical Rust is awesome, everything else is garbage kind of deep dive.
Nope, not at all. This is more like Rust, The Reckoning. We're talking about an 18-month odyssey that, to be honest, well, it left me with some questions.
Yeah, 18 months. That's not insignificant.
Yeah.
This is someone who really dug deep into the language, tried to build something substantial. And, well, it seems like they came out the other side with some, let's just say, strong feelings.
Strong feelings is putting it lightly. We're talking about a full-on, no-holds-barred critique of Rust, from the syntax to the error handling to, believe it or not, the community.
And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is that this isn't coming from someone who's, completely new to programming or doesn't understand the concepts behind Rust. They were a TypeScript user, so they had experience with a very different kind of language, and they were initially drawn to Rust for all the reasons you'd expect, right? Speed, safety, that kind of thing.
Right. They were initially a fan. They saw the appeal, but then things took a turn.
As they say, the honeymoon phase can't last forever.
And let me tell you, the honeymoon is definitely over in this story.
So what we're going to do in this deep dive is really dissect this developer's experience. And specifically, we're going to focus on the aspects of Rust that they found the most, let's say, challenging.
Challenging is one way to put it. I think downright frustrating might be a little closer to the truth. We're talking about moments where you just want to reach through the screen and shake them and say, really, this is what made you rage quit. But of course, we won't do that. We'll let their code do the talking.
Exactly. We're all about understanding here, not judging. But you're right. This deep dive is full of those wait seriously moments. But I think what makes these moments so valuable is that they reveal a lot about not just the technical aspects of Rust, but also the human side of programming. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's people who are writing this code, people who are struggling with these tools, and those struggles are real.
Absolutely. And this story really highlights that. So let's get into it. We'll start, I think, with what might be one of the most common complaints about Rust, the syntax.
Yeah, the syntax is definitely a point of, shall we say, contention in the Rust world. And our developer in this deep dive, they do not hold back.
Oh, no. No holding back here. They called it horrendous, verbose, and unintuitive, and those are just the printable words.
So words.
And they back it up with examples, too. Like, imagine trying to decipher this snippet, and this is straight from their code, folks.
And it wasn't just a matter of aesthetics either, or personal preference. This struggle with the syntax had real consequences for our developer. Like, it actually impacted their productivity, their ability to write the code they envisioned. They even talk about this one time they were building a helper function, and they ended up abandoning the whole thing because wrangling the compiler to make it work was just too painful.
You know it's bad when a seasoned developer gives up on a time-saving function because the language is fighting them every step of the way.
Right. Like at that point, it's not just about syntax anymore. It's about the overall developer experience.
And this frustration, unfortunately, it didn't end with the syntax. It kind of bled into their experience with Rust's error handling, which is ironic because one of Rust's selling points is its safety, right? It's robust error handling.
Yeah, that's the paradox of Rust, right? It's designed to be incredibly safe to prevent errors before they even happen. But that safety net, it seems, comes at a cost. And in this case, that cost was, well, our developer felt like they were constantly fighting to figure out what went wrong. They described these error messages that are just, well, cryptic, to put it mildly.
Yeah, cryptic is one way to put it. They actually compared it to being stuck in La La Land trying to decipher these error messages, which, I mean, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement for Rust developer friendliness.
Not exactly. And you know what's even funnier? They actually said that they resorted to using, get this, print statement debugging.
You're kidding. Print statement debugging in Rust. I thought that was like a cardinal sin.
Right. It seems like they were so desperate to figure out what was going on that they were willing to break out the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you how frustrating those error messages must have been.
It really does. And, it's not like they didn't try to seek help. They actually turned to the Rust community, specifically the Rust subreddit, to try to get some guidance. And, well, let's just say that experience didn't exactly improve things.
No, it sounds like that's where things took a bit of a turn, and not in a good way.
Yeah, a turn for the interesting, let's call it. So imagine this. You're struggling with this new language. You're hitting your head against the wall trying to understand these error messages. And you finally decide, okay, I'm going to swallow my pride. I'm going to go to the community and I'm going to ask for help. You know, put yourself out there, be vulnerable, hoping for some empathy, some guidance.
Yeah, we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
That moment where you're like, okay, I need a lifeline here.
Exactly. But instead of getting that lifeline, they got the opposite. They actually described the Rust subreddit as feeling, and I'm quoting here, narcissistic and cult-like, which are strong words to say the least.
Wow. Yeah, those are definitely fighting words. It sounds like they felt like their struggles weren't just being dismissed, but almost like they were being looked down upon for even having those struggles in the first place.
Right. And it's one thing to, disagree with someone's choice of tools or their approach to a problem, but it's another thing entirely to make someone feel bad for simply asking for help. And they actually gave a specific example of this. They asked a question about air handling, hoping to get some, practical advice, maybe some tips or tricks. And instead, they got responses ranging from, well, let's just say unhelpful to downright rude. Like, one person suggested that they should just switch databases entirely. Like, that's not exactly helpful advice when you're just trying to understand an error message.
Right. It's like, oh, you're having trouble with this one specific thing. We'll just upend your entire project. That'll fix it.
Exactly. And then another person chimed in with, well, why are you even using MongoDB in the first place? Which, again, not helpful. Like, they're clearly at a point where they're just trying to get something to work. And instead of offering support or guidance, these community members are essentially questioning their entire technology stack.
It's like they were being punished for not conforming to the Rust way of doing things. And that kind of attitude, it can be really damaging, especially for newcomers who are just trying to find their footing.
Absolutely. And it's like, we're all here to learn and grow as developers, right? We all started somewhere. And to make someone feel bad for asking a question, for not knowing something, it just creates this toxic environment that benefits no one.
It really does. And it can discourage people from, continuing to learn and explore, which is the opposite of what we want in a healthy, vibrant community.
Exactly. And as if those responses weren't bad enough, they even got hit with the classic, it's not the language, it's you line, which, come on, let's be honest, that's just adding insult to injury at that point.
Oh, absolutely. That's like the ultimate conversation ender.
It is. And what's really sad about all of this is that it overshadows what might actually be a really valuable learning experience. Because despite all of these frustrations, despite the syntax struggles, the cryptic error messages, the less than welcoming community, our developer actually came out of this experience with a surprisingly positive takeaway, right? They went through this whole ordeal, battled the compiler, wrestled with the syntax, faced the wrath of the Rust subreddit, and they still managed to find a silver lining.
It's kind of amazing, right? Like, you'd think they'd be running for the hills, swearing off Rust forever.
I know, I would be, but not this developer. They actually said, and I'm quoting here, after this whole Rust thing, I feel like I could learn any language.
Wow. Talk about turning a negative experience into a positive. That's some next level resilience right there.
Right. They basically went through coding boot camp from hell and came out the other side not just like battle hardened, but actually more confident in their ability.
It's like they stared into the abyss of Rust and were like, okay, bring it on, world. I've seen things.
Exactly. But it gets even better because they didn't stop there. They ended their post with this line, and this is the part that really got me. Maybe I'll pick up OCaml for the hell of it. It can't be too much worse than Rust, can it?
Oh my God, they went there. OCam.
I know. It's like they went through this trial by fire and decided, you know what? I'm going to try another fire just for fun.
I mean, hey, more power to them, right? Maybe they'll find their true calling in the world of OCam.
You never know. But jokes aside, I think their experience, as, painful as it might have been, offers a really valuable lesson for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes beyond just Rust or even programming languages in general.
Right. It's bigger than that.
It's about approaching new technologies, new tools with a healthy dose of skepticism, I think. Like, it's great to be excited about the potential of something, but it's also important to acknowledge that no tool is perfect.
And more importantly, don't be afraid to walk away if a tool isn't working for you. You don't have to force it.
Exactly. And I think that's especially important in the world of programming, where there's this constant pressure to be using the latest and greatest thing.
Oh, absolutely. The hype cycle is real.
It is. And sometimes the best tool for the job is the one you're most comfortable with, the one that lets you be the most productive, even if it's not the most popular or the most shiny.
Right. And I think this developer's experience is a perfect example of that. They went into this thinking Rust was going to be, the answer to all their problems.
The silver bullet.
Exactly. And what they discovered was that, well, it wasn't. And that's okay. Sometimes the biggest lessons come from those experiences where things don't go according to plan.
They really do. And I think it's important to remember that those experiences are just as valuable, if not more so, than the ones where everything just works perfectly.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Rust, I think the biggest takeaway here is this. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try new things. But also, don't be afraid to walk away from something that's not serving you.
Well said. And remember, there's no shame in using print statement debugging. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get the job done.
Exactly. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, happy coding, everyone.